Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Taisha. So, school is about to start, and I figured I would make a video to help out my new teachers because I wish somebody would have told me these things when I first started. Listen, there are a lot of great videos on YouTube right now that teachers are putting out that have classroom management, strategies, tools, all these wonderful things that you want to know as a teacher, and they're all great things. But if you're a brand new teacher, it can seem overwhelming because you don't understand how classroom management works because you've never had to implement classroom management. So I said, let me just put out a video talking about the things I wish somebody would have told me the first month of school. Now, let me preface this video by saying I had a mentor teacher who is phenomenal. And I also had a coach teacher who was also phenomenal. So I had support, and I had a really great team lead. So I had 3 women who were in a position to support me, and they did support me. And honestly, if it were not for those women, I would have not made it. But there were also other things that I just didn't know because I didn't know what I didn't know. That was my philosophy my whole first year of teaching. I do not know what I do not know. So I'll give you a prime example of that. I started teaching right in the middle of the pandemic. So the pandemic hit in spring. Everything shut down. I started teaching that fall. So I taught a whole year during the pandemic. Virtual learning. Half of it I was sitting right here teaching, and the other half I was in the classroom with my students on Zoom. So at the end of the year, like at the end of the second semester, because we run 2 semesters, a student was failing, but they were teetering between passing and failing, and I called on a colleague. I said, can you help me out with this because I cannot get this grade straight? And they said, well, did you do your weights? I said, excuse me, what do you mean weights? Like, did I work out this morning? No, I didn't work out this morning. If lifting this cup of coffee is working out, then yes, I did my weights. But otherwise, I have no idea what you're talking about. She was talking about weights in power school. I was like, what? What do you mean weights in power school? I had not put any weights into power school. So any grade or any assignment I was putting out to my students and grading was all on the same level. So an essay had the same weight as extra credit because I didn't put any weights in. But I didn't know I had to put weights in. I didn't even know what they were. I was like, oh my God, what are you talking about? And she explained it to me. I said, okay, I will get on top of that. But it didn't matter at the end of the day, only because everyone passed. The state passed everybody. So again, it was like, I don't want to say it was irrelevant, but I lucked out that semester or both semesters because again, they didn't have weights. But when she walked away, I typed in weights in power school and found a YouTube video on it and then figured it out. And the next year, and ever since then, I've been putting in my weights correctly. So understand that there's a lot that you don't know. And in that sense, when you come across something you don't know, YouTube and Google can always be your best friend. If it were not for YouTube for that first and second year of teaching, I don't think I would have survived because I didn't understand how to create a Canvas page. I had to create a Canvas page from scratch. I went to YouTube and found some really great YouTube videos. And I was able to create my Canvas page. Now I can create a Canvas page like nothing. But that's because I watched tons of video and I had to do it, trial and error. So let YouTube be your friend, because although I had, these great women set in place to help me, they also had things they had to do, right? So my team lead, she's trying to set up her stuff. My mentor teacher, she's helping me, but her job is to really just coach me, on, okay, do you need anything? Is your paperwork right? Is your IEPs right? All this stuff. That was her job, right? And then my other teacher, mentor teacher, was, okay, how are you going to teach this standard? How are you going to do this lesson? So I really didn't have anybody to help me with the little things like, okay, girl, set your weights up in power school. Girl, can you do a welcome page on Canvas? Like, that's the kind of stuff that, I had to learn on my own. So the next thing is to realize that it will be okay. Almost everything can be fixed or corrected. So if you put in a kid in attendance that was there, you saw them, you made eye contact with them, but you still marked them as absent, it's not the end of the world. Don't freak out. It can be fixed. You know, even a grade can be messed up. Like if I really would have messed up really bad with these kids' grade, I still could have went in and fixed it and it would have been okay. You also have to be humble, right? If you make a mistake, recognize, okay, I've made a mistake. I apologize. Now help me, grow from this mistake, learn and fix it so we can move on so I don't make it again. Um, Eating that humble pie is something you're gonna have to do as a new teacher. Another thing that I wish somebody would have told me, classroom management is important. Setting rules and procedures are important. And I knew this going into the game because I studied, educational theory and pedagogy in college. So I knew all of this, but until you see it in action, you don't recognize it. But relationships are key. If you do not set up a relationship with your students on day one, you will never teach them anything. And when I say relationships, I don't mean, oh, we're buddy buddy, that kid's my best friend, I high five him in the hallway. Just setting up the groundwork to have a solid relationship throughout, their school year or their time with you is critical and important. So that's why I say on day one, do not try to teach anything. Don't teach anything. Don't go at them. Don't hammer them. Don't, lay down the law. Don't say, these are my rules. This is my class. Don't do that on day one, because you wouldn't want somebody doing that to you on the first day of your job. Like, you'd be like, excuse me, like, what are you talking about? Okay, I understand there's rules, but do you have to throw them at me so quickly? And even day two, like, day one is chaos. Listen, teachers, brand new teachers, if you think you are going to start teaching anything on day 1, 2, maybe 3, you got another thing coming. Day 1 is going to be chaos because schedules, kids don't know where they're going. The principal's coming on the intercom. Okay, I need the seniors down so I can talk to them. I need the juniors down so I can talk to them. Don't try to teach anything on day 1. Just if you can get attendance done on day 1, then you're golden. On day 2, you may have a little bit more time, but that's, when you say, okay, here's the syllabus. Let's go over the syllabus. Talk about that. And yes, there's rules in the syllabus, but you're not honing in on them so hard that it's like, you need to do this. You have to do this. Maybe do an icebreaker on day 2. Again, you're not going to have that much time. Usually by day 3, we're getting kind of into the routine, into procedures, into the nitty gritty, stuff like that. And honestly, like I said, or maybe I didn't mention this, I teach high school English. So if you teach high school, or if you teach that middle grade, so if you teach high school 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, those kids know what they're supposed to be doing anyway, right? They're not new to this. Now, if you have freshmen, that's a whole different ball game. If you teach middle school, 7th and 8th, if your middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th, those 7th and 8th graders, they know, right? They know the rules and routines because they're not new to this. The 6th graders and the 9th graders, you have to kind of transition them a little bit differently because they're new to it. Or they're new to that environment, I should say. But yes, do not think you're going to teach anything on day 1 and day 2. Like, scrap it. Day 1 for me, this is what I do day 1. All right, guys, I'm going to call your name. This is literally the conversation I have. I'm going to call your name, obviously, here. And then give me the name you would prefer me call you. So if your name is Lucas, but you want me to call you Luke, let me know so I can know, okay, you want to go by Luke. Now, I may get a little slack for this. Don't come at me, y'all. I tell my students, if you have pronouns you would prefer me use, don't come at me. If you would have pronouns you would prefer me use, you are more than welcome to grab. I usually have sticky notes on their tables. Write on a sticky note when you feel like it's, no one else can see you per se, and just on the way out, just hand it to me. Or if you have something you want me to call you or do on the way out, hand it to me, and then I'll know that those are your preferred pronouns. I'm not here to debate if it's right or wrong. Again, my job is to create, or our job as educators are to create safe space for our students and to build relationships. And that is one way you start to build relationships. So yes, usually what I do day 1, all right, guys, if I call your name, say here, your preferred name, your nickname you want me to call you. And usually I'll say, all right, one thing you're excited about, one thing you're not excited about, or one thing you're nervous about. And usually most of them say I'm excited, just to see my friends, be back. And then one thing they're nervous about. I've had kids tell me, oh, not getting where I'm supposed to be, failing this class. Usually the jokesters would be like, I'm nervous eating lunch because lunch will kill you. It's like, okay, buddy, school lunch is really not that bad. That's that. If I can get through my entire roll call, I'm good. I'm golden. That's a check on day one. So yeah, don't overdo it. Um, Another thing, outside of building relationships with your students, understand that yes, you are there to build relationships, but it's still your job to be the educator. Like, you still have to be the professional in the room. And I think that comes with laying down solid rules and procedures. And outside of school rules, I don't think you should have more than 3 classroom rules. Now, you have school rules, right? So that falls in the line of no hats in class, no hoodies. Maybe your school, you're not allowed to have book bags in the class. Those are the school rules, but classroom rules are a little different. So some of my classroom rules are, my one big rule is, if a student wants to go to the bathroom, they have to give me their cell phone. You don't give me your cell phone, you don't go to the bathroom. Sorry. I know teachers right now are going back and forth, push and pull with these cell phones, smartwatches, earpods. How you deal with that in your classroom is your classroom. But for me, if you want to go to the bathroom, you have to give me your cell phone. I put it on syllabus. I tell parents on open house. My students know, you don't give it to me, you don't go to the bathroom. If your mom wants to call and complain, then we can have a conversation about it. Because why does your student need the phone in the bathroom? First of all, the bathroom is nasty. Second of all, if you have your phone in your bathroom, it's going to take you that much longer to get back to class. I don't need you gone for 15 minutes. What were you doing? So that's, my big rule. Another rule is, in my classroom, and this may seem funny, but it works. If you want a pencil from me, you have to give me something. And students, they know that I've had shoes, I've had car keys, I usually get earbud cases or the earpod cases. I had a kid one day actually give me his breakfast because he's like, I'm gonna eat it for lunch. I was like, dude, what? This is first block. You're gonna hold on to your breakfast till lunch? What? Go eat that breakfast. Yes, but he wanted to give me his breakfast. So if you want a pencil from me or any writing utensil, I will be happy to give you one, but you need to give me something in return. One, I'm teaching you accountability, right? Like, if you're gonna give something, if you're gonna get something from somebody, then you need to be able to give me some collateral. 2, I'm teaching you the fact that, okay, you need to give stuff back. Because I've had students run out with no shoes on. I'm like, hey, can I get my pencil back? You want your Crocs back? I don't want these nasty Crocs. These are conversations I've actually had with my students. Yes, I do call their Crocs nasty. I'm not going to lie to them. They're nasty. So that's my second rule. And I cannot remember for the love of me what my third classroom rule is. Usually, I let my students figure out the third one together as a group. And I think it has something to do with food. We're not allowed to have commercial food in our school, but I do allow my students to eat in my classroom. And usually that's where we come up with the rule, like, okay, no eating while the teacher is lecturing. It can't be something sticky or syrupy because we do have issues with ants. And that's usually a rule we come up together in the classroom. But that's it, 3 rules. And then, of course, I have the normal school-wide rules. So what else? I got off on a tangent there because I'm remembering my student with the breakfast. I was like, baby, eat your breakfast. Like, are you not hungry right now? And then, okay, this is the last thing I'm gonna talk about, is I teach in, an area that's predominantly African American, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So my students often reflect this face. So for me, as a Black teacher and an older Black teacher, I have teenagers. I'm not 22, fresh out of college. So I come at them a little bit different than a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old. At least I think I do. My students might have, or usually do, because I hear them talk, more respect for me as an African American female teacher than they do for a Caucasian female teacher. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just they see me differently than they see a white teacher. And if you're a white teacher, then please note that your African American students will look at you a little bit different. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Do not get offended by it, but I'm just telling you, it may throw you off guard, right? It's kind of hard because students should respect you no matter what your race is, and that's true. They should respect you, and they do respect them. It's just a different type or different level of respect. And I just think that's a part of society. It's cultural. It's what they see. It's what they know. I've had a lot of students say that they prefer me as their English teacher because I'm black versus a white English teacher. And I tell them, I say, listen, because I will always defend my colleagues no matter what. I never talk bad about my colleagues in front of my students, period. I think it's disrespectful. I always say, no, you need to respect them, not because of their race, but because one, they're a person and they deserve your respect, and two, they're trying to teach you and educate you. And the world doesn't necessarily work like that, right? When you step out of this bubble of school, you have to be able to interact with everyone, different races, genders, and they all deserve your respect in, some way, shape, or form. And of course, my students always have comments for that, but I'm like, no, trust me when I say you can't look at somebody based on their color and say, I'm going to respect you a little bit differently because you're black or you're white or you're Hispanic or you're Asian. No, everyone deserves your respect. But just know, be aware of it. And when I kind of segue into that is be able to check your privilege. I myself have to check my privilege. I just assumed that all my students knew Shakespeare or knew who Shakespeare was. And I never forget this conversation I had with my students. I said something to them. I said, what do you think Shakespeare meant when he said this? And I had like a quote with it. And my students were like, who's Shakespeare? Now these were my 11th grade students. Like, what do you mean who's Shakespeare? William Shakespeare. Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Taming of the Shrew. What? Like, you don't know Shakespeare? And they're like, I've never heard of Shakespeare. And I was like, y'all are joking. Y'all have never heard of Shakespeare? What in the world? And I was kind of getting a little upset and frustrated. And then I had to like reflect later on that day and think, clearly they didn't know who Shakespeare was. Me saying y'all know who Shakespeare is numerous times didn't make it any better. It actually probably made them feel stupid or it made the whole situation worse. But I was just I was upset because like I felt like the school system had failed them. I'm like, how do you get to 11th grade? You've never heard of William Shakespeare. And it's not that they didn't pay attention. My entire class had no idea who William Shakespeare was. So I had to check my privilege. The fact that I know who this person is, or I know who all these literary scholars are, I should know these things, right? I went to college. I have a degree in English. I have a master's in teaching. I should know all these things. But I should not be upset when my students don't know these things because my anger should not be directed towards them. It should be directed towards, okay, who let this happen? Who let these kids get to this point and they didn't know X, Y, and Z? So when I say check your privilege, check what you know and do not get upset when your students don't know it. Because then I had to turn around and teach it. And best believe my students knew who William Shakespeare was. And I teach it to it doesn't matter if I'm teaching 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. I always teach some type of William Shakespeare. I'm team William Shakespeare. So, okay, I'm almost at 20 minutes. Let me hurry this up. What other things can I tell you that kind of help you as a new teacher? It will be okay. YouTube is your friend. Yes, there are many, many things that you know that you don't know. And when you realize that you don't know them, it will be like a light bulb and then, you'll figure out how to fix it. Build a relationship and a community with your students, build a community with your students. Have classroom norms and set up some of those norms, rules, and procedures with your students because it is their classroom. Yes, it's your classroom. You're the teacher, but it's also their classroom. It's their space. It should be a safe space. It's okay to laugh and joke with your students. If you teach a 90-minute block, do not teach for that entire 90 minutes. It's okay some days if you just say to them, all right, y'all, I have no idea what we're doing today. We're going to wing it, but we'll get through it. And they'll usually, especially if it's high school kids, they'll be like, okay, that's fine. We good. That's cool. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know what we're doing today. We're going to just wing it. Don't let that be on the day where you're getting... or you're being observed because you can't wing it that day. I mean, you should always have some type of lesson to teach. And then, that's it. If you create this beautiful lesson and it doesn't go the way you want it, that's okay. At the end of the day, take a deep breath, reflect on it, write it down, see where it didn't go the way you wanted it to, and then figure out how can I make it better. And understand that you can teach one lesson to one group of students, that exact same lesson to another group of students, and they can be completely different because they're not the same set of students, right? So the space is different. Last thing I'm gonna leave you with this is don't buy everything from Teachers Pay Teachers. Yes, Teachers Pay Teachers is great, but I found that these wonderful units don't always have a lot of differentiation in it. So if you have students who are all on different levels in one class, then yes, that unit may be great for one type of student, but you may have a whole different type of student in your class, or just a bunch of different clusters of students in your class. So yes, Teachers Pay Teachers is a wonderful thing, a wonderful resource, but just know that you cannot buy one of those units and just run with it and think that that's it. No, there's some other stuff you're gonna have to do to it. Because if you do teach from one of those units the whole semester or the whole course, then you're doing you and your students a disservice. And then the last thing, I love this quote, and I think this is a great quote. The teacher has long been gone. I think she died a couple years ago, but she said, "Every student needs a champion," and I believe that. But I'm gonna add to it, yes, every student needs a champion, but you don't have to be every student's champion.